Hello everyone, and welcome to a new video, the first video of 2022. Happy New Year, and I hope that you had a great time with your families during the holidays. So now the holidays are done, let's get back to business, which means let's get back to some good GM preps. And in this shorter video, I hope, I will attempt to do a quick recap of session 34. I've had some comments from people that they like seeing what I prep and then what I actually use and play. So this is the goal of this video. We will briefly recount what happened in session 34, and I will show you what I did use from the actual material that I had prepared for this session to see if I was spot on, if I left any holes, if I had any problems. That will be the first part of the video. The second part of the video will be a specific situation in the session that happened, a battle at a window. And I used some rulings and some optional rules from the Advanced Player's Guide there to great effect. So it will be basically, I'll talk about how this quick little combat that was pretty much in the PC's favor still was quite fun to play, and why that is, and how we use the rules to make it interesting. So that will be the second part, and lastly I will just quickly go over a few GM tools I'm starting to build for this setting. So there's a tool for Thistlehold. There's just some names and some quick descriptions for stock NPCs, stuff like that. So I'll show those at the end of the video. And if you're interested by having a copy of those, then you can comment in the comments and I will send you a copy of those documents. So here we go. So this said, let's have a little drink of this really nice French white wine. And let's dive in. So let's start with a recap of session 34. For those who don't know, we're playing Symbaroum. This is the game. This is the actual module, if you want, that I'm using, Wrath of the Warden. It's the first chapter of a great saga, but we're using the beginning of this book. There's a little adventure landscape called Blooming Vale, and that's what we were playing. So let's dive in. This is what I had prepared for this session. If you remember, and for those who don't remember, you can watch previous videos, but basically in this Blooming Vale there's a tower, the Tower of Ambriagos, and the players were in the tower and confronted the undead Crypt Lord and are now besieged by an undead army that are surrounding the tower. They successfully retreated up in the tower to a point in the stairs where there's iron bars that can be closed and locked, and that's what they did. So they're hiding there, and they need to get out. And the major way that they had to get out was a ritual called 7 League Stride, and that's what they will try to use. So I wanted to, because the mage that would do this, Vild, the ogre mage, he would have to do the ritual, takes 1 hour, go to Thistlehold, do the ritual again, takes another hour, come back, and each time he can take only one person with him. So the whole process was going to take a lot of hours, and I want to add some things to spice this process and try to make, create a bit of tension in this session around this process. But, and that's a big but, I didn't want to get mired into tons of combat again, because we played 3 whole sessions of combat and action in this setting, and now it was time for them to get back to Thistlehold. But I didn't want to make it overly easy too, because there's still all these dragouls around the tower, like 100 of them, surrounding them. So they had to feel some pressure. So that's the weird balancing act that I had, is that in the, let's say if you go at it just logically, then you say, okay, it's still the battle, there's a siege and everything. But if you go at it with just narratively and the level of interest by your players and the rhythm of the game, you really need to consider, have we had enough of this? Do we want to move to another location? Do we want to feel that the story is progressing? And the answer to that question was a definite yes. We needed to get out of there because 3 sessions in this little setting was enough. Those were my goals, basically. Keep some tension on, keep the mood in there, react to what they were going to do, because they could have decided to stay more and it would have been extremely dangerous, but they could have. And I needed to react to that, but leave the door open for this escape plan to succeed. So what I had prepared is this, and I had the Tormented Tobella was the first element. She's the mage that they were going to rescue. She was the first mage, first expedition that explored the Vale and that was enslaved by the Crypt Lord, and now they needed to get her out. So she was. They managed to save her. They managed to get to her and destroy the rune and save her. But now they needed to get her out. She was going to be tormented and wants to recover Archillo's body, her novice that was with her, just to avoid having him become an undead. And she would want to bring back the copper tubes and the codexes of Amberagos that are under the tower, because or else all this mission is for naught. I didn't push too hard on this element. I'll come back to it later. But so the second element was Vild's enemies. Vild the player chose the burden called Nemesis or Arch Enemy, something like that. So once per adventure, the Arch Enemy will do something to spoil the party. So I had that going on. I had Mikariol, the Alberian mage. He was he was on the brink of becoming Blightborn. So he was completely hallucinating and having all these weird feelings, and it was horrible. So I needed to stress the horror of that. Dark Thins Under was if they decided to go under, explore, then what would happen. I knew they wouldn't do it, so I didn't really push too much there on the preparation side. I wanted to have an appearance of Eox, the bull god of this region, that brought them there as a thank you gesture. And of course, what happens with the dragouls siege. And the last thing I prepared is here it's an alchemist in Thistlehold, because I knew that Vild, when he got to Thistlehold, will be looking for the purple sap, which is the elixir that gets rid of temporary corruption. Why? Because in the tower, all the players, the player characters, were getting corrupted, and this location is corrupted terrain, so you cannot get rid of your temporary corruption. So it's just a question of time before you become Blightborn. So if I sum it up really quickly, what happened is, first of all, when we started the session, Vild just left the tower with Mikariol, which was really on the brink. He was having sort of visions of this darkness under the tower. He was hallucinating. He was not seeing straight who is my friend, who is my enemy. So he was having a hard time. He got brought back to Thistlehold. During that time, when they were preparing the ritual to bring him back as quick as possible, Edogai, which is another player character that belongs to the same player that has Vild, the ogre magician, he had a vision, because he has a soul bond with Vild. So he knew that Vild was preparing to come back, that things were bad. So he went around town to try to look for purple sap in advance. And he went to the Thaler drugstore, talked to the sisters there, didn't go well. And then he ended up at Jurgoy's, which is what I had prepared here. The extremely narrow shop squeezed between two large houses, very, very high ceiling, like only, it's like a mezzanine, so it's completely up to the roof. So it's very vertical in its vibe, this place. And vials and dry herbs and everything. And they met Jurgoy, the dark-haired and suspicious guy. And it was pretty friendly and just interesting, short and quick shopkeeper interactions. But it was, I think it didn't bore anybody because it was quick, and it was just a way of getting a bit more information about Thistlehold, about what's available there. And I had this little table here with a d6 possibility, and I ended up using everything because he talked to him for the purple sap. Of course, the purple sap would be there, and after that, he wanted to know if there was anything else that could be of use, and I just decided to say that this was the whole stock, like what he had in stock at that point was that, and they bought everything. So that was fun. But regarding that, I have to say that I tend to be not on the generous side. That I don't mean that I will provide tons of them all the time, but I like to give out some when I can, because it's fun. It's just little things that they can use. And also with my group, they're still learning the game. They're still learning what exists in the game. So it was a nice little moment where I could give them a bit of little toys to play with, and just it's like a little reward for what they did in that Vale. And so once that was done, I have the list here of what happened when he came out of this alchemist shop. He was met by Dolani, narrow nose, little beard, squinted eyes. This man, Dolani, is actually an NPC from Wrath of the Warden. He's a black cloak. He was a tutor at the convent in Indaros, which is a nice coincidence because Bo, the goblin player, the player character, is also from Indaros, from that convent school. That's where he learned his prior powers. And so when they will meet, he will know this Dolani. And Dolani was a very mean-hearted and bitter man that didn't want to be teaching goblins. Like, that's the last thing he wanted to do. And so he was very frustrated and really bad. And that's for the future. So what I did here is what I always do, always try to do at least, is to try to tie in as many NPCs and elements as I can from the upcoming campaign that I'm using into the PC's narrative. So, because I do use printed material, I do not really do sandbox that much. I don't really like it. I like working off something because it gives me a lot. It gives me NPCs, it gives me locations, maps, all sorts of stuff that I don't have to create myself. So that's a big plus. That's why I pay for it. That's why I buy it. And the way that you take this printed material and really integrate it into your group and make it feel natural to the players. They never feel railroaded at all. And they never feel that it feels like stitched on or stapled on, or that you can't have that. You need to have player buy-in. And to have player buy-in, it means that the logic of the narrative has to always be believable. So the more you tie story elements to the background of the players, of the player characters, the more it feels natural and organic. And it doesn't, first it helps tie everything together, and second, it gives them strong motivations to push forward often. So it's really a win-win all the time. It's really, I think, the thing that maybe beginning GMs won't think of doing because they're a bit already overwhelmed and they're just thinking, okay, let's just create PCs, and I read the book and I'll just go chapter by chapter and we'll just go through and see what happens. That, by experience, is, you can have quite a lot of fun out of that, but you will never have the total immersion into the story that creating these links will provide. So if there's one rule I try to abide by, is that the narrative has its own truth and you have to respect that truth, because if you break it, everything breaks down. The suspension of disbelief breaks down. So in this case, it's just a little thing. I don't know what will happen with that, but I just seeded that in because I know that later in Wrath of the Warden they will meet that guy again, and probably even earlier than that. If you watch my next video on the prep for session 35 that we're playing tomorrow night, they might get to confront these guys earlier than expected. We'll see. Anyways, so when he steps out, so Edogai is this a bit steampunky kind of mage that likes to create artifacts. He's a blacksmith. He steps out of the shop with all his stuff. He has his flaming servant with him, which is like really a servant, not really that much of a warrior. Big, but an old, very ancient armor, but mostly a servant. And they step out on the road and they meet Dolani with 8 sellswords, and they are the sellswords of the sun. So of course, if any of you listening this want to play Wrath of the Warden and the Throne of Thorns, that's not a place for you. This is a GM only video, so please stop watching because you're gonna ruin the fun for your game. But if you're planning to GM Wrath of the Warden, well, you should know that there is like a side quest where the players are to defend a priest that's considered a heretic against fanatic Prius worshippers, namely the Sellswords of the Sun. And the Sellswords of the Sun, they're like their immediate little, maybe their leader on the ground, if you want, their sergeant major or something, is Dolani. And Dolani, that's where he appears for the first time in my story. And so they just jumped him when he came out of the Alchemist shop. And they told him, the fact that you're learning magic to an ogre, Vild is the novice of Edogai. Edogai is a human, an Ambrian mage. They said that will not do. This is not acceptable. This ogre has to go back into the forest, and if you don't send him back into the forest, we'll teach you a lesson. And then they started acting tough, and they sent 4 of their guys. He said, "Okay, give him a lesson." And they started hitting on the flaming servant, and actually the flaming servant, like, I think he has polearm mastery or something, and he did like a super riposte, and he just completely trashed these poor guys. He didn't trash them completely, of course. He just trashed them, just gave them a few bruises and everything, but they barely hurt the thing. And so they were a bit surprised. Dolani put another layer of threat, and they just left. They had yellow sashes on their arms, and we'll see them again in a while. So that was just, it was pretty lighthearted, you know. It was a bit funny, sincerely. He wasn't scared at any point in that encounter, and I didn't want to make it like that. I wanted these Sellswords of the Suns, which are a bit of a comic relief, basically. I mean, truly. I wanted them to play tough, and they discovered the strength of Edogai and his servant. And so now they're going to take him a bit more seriously. They've seen that, oh, he's a powerful mage with a powerful servant. And so the next moves of this gang will be much more deadly, because they will be more organized and they know a bit more what they're facing right now. So anyways, so that's for the next steps. After that, what did I use? I actually pretty much used everything, because Vild went back into the tower, and he gave some purple sap that alleviated somewhat the problems there. Came to Thistlehold back with the goblin bow, and while they were gone, the dragouls attempted to attack. And they wanted to, they were besieging this tower, and when they were getting close to the barred stairway, the flaming servant of Mikariol was behind on the other side of this barred stairway and would just stab them through. And they didn't really they suffered a big setback in that stairway against another fire spirit earlier, so they sort of abandoned the stairs for that at that point, and the dragouls decided to try the vines that were climbing on the tower and to get in by the window. And so they emerged in the court, the room of the court of Ambriagus through the window, and there was a quick fight at the window that I will describe a bit later in the video at the end. I will say how because it wasn't a big threat. It was 4 dragouls trying to climb the vines and get in, and they didn't know that there would be a resistance there necessarily. They just wanted to sort of explore, get in, maybe be the first and protect the window while more dragouls went in. And the quick fight that was there was actually tactically really interesting and had a few moments where we had little scares, and yeah, it was an interesting fight. So I will detail it a bit more in detail for those who like that kind of stuff at the end of this video. Once this fight was over, Vild came back, and he brought back the toys from Jorgoy. He brought back one last dose of purple sap, and they saw, because the sun was starting to rise, they saw Eox at the top of the cliff, because this tower of Ambriagus is it's almost a sinkhole. It's a valley that's like a part of land just sunk into the ground, and so on the sides of this valley are very vertical cliffs, and at the top of one of those cliffs was this immense bull, sort of greenish, emeraldy, turquoisey, more turquoise color with pink spots and emerald horns, and this Eox not belched, but that's not the right word. He just basically went with a big moo, super deep and super that had everything vibrate almost, because it was so deep. And Vild, which has beast tongue, went to the window and answered and asked him. I don't remember what he tried to tell him, but Eox responded by a thank you, basically. And because you see, Vild has beast tongue, which can seem really powerful for a boon. But you're talking to animals. Animals have their own mentality. They don't talk necessarily complicated sentences. So if you play it like that, if you play it like animals are animals and they can express what animals are able to create in their minds as thoughts, then it's not overpowered, because you're not going to have a chat with an owl and then start, talking philosophy with the horse. You're going to have really basic, in the moment interactions with animals, which is nice to roleplay actually. It's very here and now and very visceral, and it can be really interesting. So I wanted there to be communication with Eox, and the other reason why I wanted this communication to be able to work is because in the backstory of Vild, when we created his character at the very beginning, I knew that Eox would be a thing. I knew that I wanted to use Blooming Vale as sort of an introduction to Wrath of the Warden, because it gives some richness to Ambriagus, to the Ambriagus name, and it gives something to be sad about when Eox will get his head chopped off. So it's to make sure that the PCs have strong motivations to get into Wrath of the Warden. That's why I sort of prepared that from directly in session 0 without telling them, of course, anything. But when we created Vild, he said that he woke up in the forest, that a barbarian witch took him for a while, and then she died of old age, and he wandered alone, and he met this. That's where I introduced Eox. I said he met this huge bull somewhere in the forest, and he has these memories that feel like dreams of having this encounter, because he was like a baby. He was like a 3-year-old, so you don't really keep strong memories of what happens at that age. So that's the way I presented to him, that he had this encounter with an ancient forest spirit. So when he comes back, Eox, then Vild wants to talk to him a bit more. And just to stress that point even more, when there was this the face-to-face with Ambriagos, the Crypt Lord is a worshipper of Eox, because in the days, this prince and his family and his dynasty were protected by Eox. And so he wanted, because he realized that Vild could speak the language of Eox, he wanted Vild to come by his side to be his Teurg of Eox. So there was this idea that Vild could develop a further relation with this divinity, this god of the forest, was already there in that discussion. So it's sort of, that's what I said last time in the other video, is that I wanted Eox to come back to make this thread continue to evolve, and sort of just to give a signal to the players that Eox is still there, he's still part of the story. It's not because we closed this chapter with Ambriagos and the Crypt Lord that means that the whole thing has to go down the drain and it's over and we move to the next thing. That's not how stories work for me. I like things to really intertwine and come back and go away, and so that's what happened with Eox's gratitude. So it was a very short moment in game, but it was what it needed to be. And at the end of that, they all reconvened in Thistlehold, and they did that because they asked the Ordo Magica to help out, to have a second mage that could do another 7 league stride. So Vild came back to the tower with Kullinan Furia, and that's a major player in the campaign. So I was really happy that they asked him to help. And so Kullinan came back, and they did like 2 by 2. They got everybody out. So that was great. That was perfect. And I will talk about that in my next video while I prep session 35, because it was so perfect that Kullinan could come to the tower and use the magical circle that Vild created there. So, but I'll talk about that later. So basically, if I just sum up for my prep and what I used and didn't use, and was it worth it? In this case, sorry about that. In this case, I used everything that I had prepped, because I had prepped not that much. So I really prepped what I needed. I would have liked to have a bit more. I like the Sellswords of the Sun were a bit hard to roleplay. I didn't want to make them complete jokes, but I didn't want to make them so aggressive that a really bad confrontation would almost automatically devolve from that. So I'm sort of still seeking them. Like, what's their vibe? What's their DNA as a group? It's not totally clear in my head yet. So that's why I kept it pretty low key, minimal. They just did their threats, tried to beat up a robot, basically, the flaming servant, and left. And we'll see what I do later with that. But that's the part that maybe I was a bit lacking in my preparation. With Tobela, I didn't go too far in the torment. She did have a little moment where she said what, she expressed her motivations. But after that, we sort of didn't brush that under the table, but it was decided as a group that they would not push in the tower to find the copper tubes. They thought about it, but then they just realized it was much too dangerous. So a lot of this little prep here, like the 2 info points at the end, there will be used next session. Yeah, and that's about it. So that's a perfect example, actually, as this is what a prep should look like. It was a bit thin. It could be like 2 pages, 2 full pages instead of just 1.5. but it was enough for the game. I will now go to the scene of the window, the battle at the window. So what happened there, and why do I want to talk about it? Well, the battle at the window is, I think, typical of those combat encounters that you need, I would say, sometimes to just spice up a game, put some action in there. It depends. It really depends on the group. Some groups can role play for hours on end and never need to throw a die, and they're quite happy with it. I would say that my table is probably a bit more. I would say it's not half and half. It's more role play than combat, but let's not call it combat. Let's call it action scenes where something physical is going on, and you need to roll dice to know if you're going to succeed, and there's maybe a danger of getting wounded or even killed, but it's not necessarily combat. It can be just a chase. It could be trying to open this portal while the roof is falling around you. It could be saving people from a burning building. Some kind of action scene. So we like to have action scenes regularly, I would say, but I really like them when they are short, to the point, very vivid, and that the narrative role of that scene, of that action scene, is not just beat the opponent, because that's really boring. I mean, that's like a boxing match. I mean, I know people like boxing, and great, but boxing is fun when you go see actual boxers really box. Not when you're imagining boxers and you're throwing dice to see who hits who. Because it's all about stakes. You need stakes. You need to have interesting stakes for the whole action stuff to be interesting. So, and in that particular combat that I want to talk about is very. Actually, it was high stakes, but they were in a very advantageous position. So they weren't really scared. They had a good defensive position. But if they didn't succeed, against all odds, like if the dice really were traitor to them, that could have been almost a total party kill. I mean, if they can't contain them and the dragouls start pouring in from the window, it's pretty much done for those player characters. So that's a really interesting dynamic, because it's asymmetrical. It means that you have great chances of success, very few chances of failure, but if you do fail, the consequences are tremendous. So that means that there's a little feeling of unease in the players while this is happening, because they're just touching wood, They're just thinking, okay, we can't drop this. We've got this. We need to, we need to keep control on this situation, because if it goes haywire, then we're done. So that was the kind of scene. I will just go back here and move to this here. So this is the third level of the Tower of Ambriagos, and they were at this window here. This is Miresin, the barbarian archer, and Lodemé, the Templar lady. And there was the two ogre servants, and there was Tobela also, that you can't see her token right now, but doesn't matter. She didn't play a very important role in that scene. The other ogres were checking the other windows, as Tobela was, just to make sure that dragouls were not trying to go around from the other windows as well. But I decided that this window was the one where there were many vines, like thick enough vines that you could climb in them and get to the window. And so I won't go I won't go round per round or anything. I will just tell you that let's say these are the dragouls here. Well, actually they're dead. So they were coming in. What is this? Yeah, that's another one. Okay. They were coming in. And what I did is I used the rules from the the Advanced Player's Guide. So I highly recommend them. So this is what I was using, the maneuvers. The maneuvers are really interesting little rules that really make combat much more, first of all, varied, but also balanced. Because a lot of people playing Symbaroum are complaining, and with reason, that the player characters become overpowered pretty quickly as they gain new abilities, especially when they push those abilities to master level. It's true, there are some abilities that are extremely powerful, but if you use those rules from the Advanced Player's Guide and you roleplay the opponents intelligently. For example, there's Ludome, she's in full plate, she has a shield, she has a sword, flaming sword, and she hacks at, she literally cuts people in half with it. What would a group of people that are really badly armed do against her? They won't face her one by one and get their heads chopped off. They will find a way to attack her from behind, pull her down. They will find a way to first neutralize her offensive capabilities, and then they will try to kill her. And that's why it's really horrible what I'm saying. It's like I'm talking to it's like a murderer class today. But you get the meaning. For it to be fun, combat needs to always be a bit dangerous. So you need to be able to do that as a GM, to have tools to make combat always a bit uncertain, a bit dangerous. It can't be too predictable, or else it won't be fun. So these maneuvers here are really useful for that. The ones that we use the most are careful aiming, sometimes is used. Charge is used quite often just to get the combatants together quickly and have them hack at it a bit more. Full defense has been used quite a lot by, for example, Ludome, when she was containing the dragoul horde in the stairs, she was by herself while the others were fighting the Crypt Lord on the 5th level. She was in front of 50 undead, and she just backed into the stairs, and she was just hacking at them in the stairs, and she was using full defense to make sure that she can hold the stairs. This one is a critical one here. It's almost too powerful. I sort of nerfed it a bit because this is what I used in this scene. The situation started, Ludome realized that they were coming up the vines. They were almost there. They poured some oil to try to put some flames into those vines. Mirizin, the barbarian, just chugged some oil over the attackers, and he missed his accurate roll, and the oil almost didn't go on the vine that much and just went on, everywhere, a bit on the attackers, a bit on the vine, and then he put fire in there, and so it didn't really stop them, but one of them caught fire, and then they were on that. They were ready to grab at them and to try to attack them. So they were really at total disadvantage, like in the vines with a hand trying to pull the opponent from the window. But they're dragouls, so they can't feel pain. So you really have to destroy them before they get you. And so they were just mindlessly coming up, and they wanted to grab an ankle or grab anything they could and just pull hard and get the opponent to fall out the window. So that was one thing that made it a bit scary, is that with the hold here, they could grab and do something bad afterwards. So you see, it's strong versus strong. So what I did is that I used strong versus strong, but I gave them 2 chances to succeed. because they were in such an advantageous position. So it wasn't just advantage, it was 2 chances to succeed. When they did attack them and they stabbed at them, they had advantage, so they did +2 to hit and 1d4 damage. And so what they did, because they realized, okay, there's this very slim chance that the dragoul will grab me, and I could get stuck in the window and maybe even get pulled out. And if I get pulled out, then it was like a 30. Well, it's 4 stories high, so it was a painful descent, possibly deadly. So what we also used was pushback. So pushback, you hit, do half damage, and you push back 5 meters the target. So what happened is that they backed out of the window, they let a dragoul come in, and they hacked at it when it came in the room. So there was a little danger that one would be able to come, move inside the room. If I go back to the map, you can see that what happened is that there was one there in the window. And so if they stayed like this, then the dragoul had advantage because it was on top, and it could even possibly leap inside. So what they did is that they went side by side like this. I think Mirizin was here, I can't remember. No, he was here. And so the dragoul jumped down, they hacked at it and killed it, and then another one came. But things were not that clean because I used pushback. So the second one came in, pushed her back like this, another one was coming in, and so Mirizin had to close the gap, so he went in the window and tried to fight them in the window, and then he almost got thrown out the window, because always hold attacks, hold and pushback attacks, that's what they were doing. And even with 2 chances to fail, they still managed to get some through. A heavy armored Templar like Ludome, she doesn't have a great defense, and so she can fail twice in a row, no problem. Her strength is her armor. She gets hit, but she doesn't get damaged. But when you're getting held, you actually, what you want is not to get held. So that's why I repeat, it's really important to use those maneuvers, because it will make mobs and groups of people that aren't really good fighters, but they're really outnumbering you, they will become dangerous, as they should. Because if you have 5 motivated guys around you, like wielding clubs, they're just going to taunt you because they want the guy that's in the back of you to, as soon as he has the opportunity, he's going to come in and he's sort of going to jump on your sword arm. He's going to grab your sword arm. Another guy's going to jump into your legs, and then they'll all pelt on you, and you'll be just immobilized on the ground with people hitting you with clubs. So you're out. And this is, I mean, with super powerful characters like they can become in Symbaroum, that's the kind of tactical, for me it's just realism, really. It's not even tactics. It's really just bringing the grit into the game. That's what it is. And it's really easy to do. It's not hard at all. And of course the players can do that to your characters too, but usually in adventures the player characters are outnumbered. They're powerful people and they're fighting lesser enemies in larger numbers. That's the typical confrontation. So by using that kind of pushback, disarm, sometimes even knockout, throw rocks to try to knock out the guy, or even if those attacks don't necessarily have that much, like the percentage chance of success of those attacks isn't that high, it's the same as I was saying before. It's if you do fail and you are held, you're suddenly in deep shit. Like, it gets bad real quick. So those rolls become very stressful, because even if you have only 3 chances out of 20 to miss, but you know that if you do miss, like your whole defensive apparatus crumbles, then that roll is stressful. And for me as GM, I want stressful rolls that are a success for the PCs. I want that. That's what I want. I'm rooting for the players. I want them to succeed ultimately. I don't want a TPK. That's not my goal at all. So to have those low probability rolls that could lead to some very nasty things is fun. Of course, it's dangerous because if they do miss their roll, then they could suffer. That's why we use the other optional rule is reroll for XP. I do use that because since progression in that game is a problem in the sense that characters can become quite powerful real fast, I'm really happy to let them spend their XP while they play. And again, if they miss their first roll and they spend an XP and succeed on the second roll, you could say, it destroys any chance of failure. First, it doesn't. I had a player last game, well, the game before, pay an XP to reroll, failed. Took a permanent corruption to reroll, failed again. So it's not sure that they will make it anytime. And he had 15, or 16 on 20 and lower to succeed, and he failed 3 times in a row. So I don't mind that the chances that catastrophe happens is low, because you don't want catastrophe to happen often, because that's not fun. But the stress needs to be there. That's the whole point of this, is that you need to put the fear in the players of what could happen. And that's why I always, that kind of ruling, I will announce. Like I tell them even between games. I tell them, listen, your character, your PC, like for example, the player of Ludemé, the Templar, I explained to him out of game. I just said, when you're a knight like you're built up right now, this is the situation where you're in the right situation. I describe it to him. I say, when you're facing 1 or 2 opponents in front of you and nobody can get you in the back and you have other people covering your flanks, that is the ultimate death dealer situation. You will kill enemies like chopping wheat. But I told him weaker enemies will use whips, lassos, nets, rocks. They will jump you from all sides, and as soon as you are held, you are in grave danger of death. And that's how you get rid of heavily armored combatants when you're not heavily armored yourself. So the players know. They know the tactics. They know what weaker enemies might go for, and sometimes they will use their own tactics, like intimidation, like feigning that you're calling reinforcements that don't exist, like all sorts of ways to play with the psychology of the opponent to make sure that they don't encircle you, that they don't feel too confident, that they don't start playing cat and mouse with you. You want to keep them on their back step. You want to keep them guessing. And that's this mind game, and that's why I said in the other video too that it's not because you're fighting that you stop talking. This talk, this combat talk is psychological warfare, and it's really effective. And it's really effective even when you're GMing the opponents against the players, because they might use that kind of tactics too. They can, ring a bell to as if a whole army is on the other side of the door, even though they know that there's like maybe 2 more guys that can come help. The players don't know that. So you need to use all those elements to always just keep things unpredictable, keep things fun, keep things stressful, even though it's not necessarily, if you look at the statistics of it and at just the mechanics of it, it's not really a dangerous situation for the PCs. So this could be like a run-of-the-mill, super boring fight where you're really wondering, why are we fighting these dragouls? Like, we fought them for 3 sessions and now we have 4 more to fight, and what's so interesting here? Well, the way I did it, and I think that was fun, and just little tidbit here, the ogre Claga, who's robust 3, he's huge. He came in at the end and took one of those benches there and just slammed one of the one of the dragouls, like his head between his shoulders, because Ludeme was pushed back and was grabbed. Her arm was grabbed, and she wasn't in grave danger, but she was struggling a bit against that one, and so the ogre came by and helped her out. Anyways, I'm losing my train of thought. What I was saying is that this combat was interesting for 2 reasons. First, like what were the stakes here is you didn't have the whole party. All the mages were gone. There was only the 2 combatants of the party and an NPC mage that could help, but she was really high on corruption, and she could become Blightborn if she did it too much. That was the first stake. It was it's not just a stake, it was just different. It's like a different mix, so it's interesting, it's new. Second thing, this blue line here is the magic circle that Vild created. That was just a temporary magic circle. So if the dragouls, if the combat stepped, and I did at one point, I think there was a random chance. Yes, when the big ogre came by here, I rolled to see if he would remember not to step on the circle, and he succeeded, and so he didn't destroy the circle. Because if the circle was destroyed, then they would get stuck, because Vild could not come back with the spell to get them out of there. So they would have been completely stuck by themselves, and it would have been like, oh my god. Probably Tobela would have been able to recreate the circle, but maybe that would have taken an hour, maybe, anyways, that was one of the minor stakes of this scene. So it was cool, and just the visuals of it, if you think about it, and I'll just close on that. The visuals of that scene, you're in this tower, the deep window, the vines flaming, the dragoul coming in the window with flames on his shoulder, pushing inside, the barbarian jumping in the window, almost getting himself thrown out of the window. He gets a scare, steps back, and all this to and fro, this movement, these changing stakes as they realize, because they start in the window, they realize they can get pulled out, they back off, then they start coming and pushing, and they start succeeding in entering the room, so they go back in the window even though they know they can get pushed down and fall down. So all these micro decisions were the ingredients of a good fight. That's where players and we have fun, because every round is different. Every round has a new challenge, tactical challenge or problem to solve, that you say, oh shit, we did this and now this happens, and now okay, how do we manage to so that was why this little mini fight was fun and I wanted to share it with you. Okay, so now we're getting to the end of the video. I just wanted to tell you, well, first of all, these videos take a little bit of while to make. I really like making them, but if you want to support the channel, of course, like and subscribe. That's the basics. And comments are good too. If you want to put in a little comment, it's good because I can know what you guys think and maybe adjust. And also, you can go check out Playing with Goblins on Drive-Thru RPG. It's an adventure that I wrote for Symbaroum. It includes a goblin village that's fully described. And there's like a few other things like rules for a pursuit in the forest. So if you want to check that out, that also supports this channel. So to end this video, I will just show you a few GM tools that I made, that I started making, that I could share with you. First of all, the stat blocks. The stat blocks are really inspired by the new stat blocks of the game. And now I'm thinking, because I talked with, I think it's Ben Kenning is his name, on the Discord channel of Symbaroum, and he writes barks in his adventures for his NPCs. And barks are very short sentences, very typical sentences that an NPC would say, that they create for the video games, you know, for the background people that say stuff randomly. So I really like that idea, because in my stat blocks, this first part here is basically description, motivation, the voice. There's one bark here, fall to your knees, insect, that I did not use, but I think I prefer barks. Barks are saying so much more about the character than any description will. So I think I might try to put in like 3 or 4 barks at the beginning of the description of the NPC. And the other thing I started doing for complex NPCs is to have the most important actions at the bottom here, so you know how to play them, because I forget. So many times I forget, oh, he can do that, ah, darn, had I known. Anyways, so those are the stat blocks. I have here just names that I could share with you. So I used a lot of the names that are in the Excel file that the game provides, with all the NPCs of all the modules in one place. So I just chose some names in there. I made some up. So I have Ambrian and all of that. There's a little checkbox, so when you're using it in play, you can say, okay, I used Gorillan, but I made him young, bright, and curly. You could just put a line between those and tie them up, and so there you go. So basically you have 6 males, 6 females for barbarians and Ambrians, and you have some goblin names here, which are female and male. Same thing with ogres, elves, and a bit more goblins here. So that I could share with you. The other thing that took me quite a while, and that I just did one district. So I love Thistlehold and I love cityscapes, but they're pretty hard to GM typically, because you want to make those places feel alive, but they're big places with a lot of people. It's very complex. So so I started to do, it's like a giant memo for each district. So if they go in a district, I can just have this page in front of me, and at least I know the most important parts. And then here I have a bit more detail on everything that was described in the adventures, or at least in the Thistlehold descriptions. I have at the bottom here. So yeah, the first line is always a short description. Muddy expanse of stalls filled with fowl, swine, and grain. Peasants come in early and leave an hour or 2 before nightfall. Bawds and swindlers preying on you in a while. So I put NPCs in bold, like people that you could meet. And sometimes you have NPCs that are part of the official canon, if you want. Like the widow Aragina, Sephira, crippled mother Mehira. Those are all actual characters in the books, and I just put them there. I put some page references. I have to go through again just to try to put all the page references, make sure I didn't forget any. Then I made these tables, which are I'm not totally happy with yet. So they're just like this for now. So who's on the street, just if I want to know who's on the street. I realize that when I GM, usually I don't roll. I don't have time to waste, so I just look at the table. I say, okay, oh yeah, there's an artisan. That gives me an idea, and I say, okay, and there's 2d4 urchins playing around them, and it's really sparks for creating something. you know, it's really, really roughly done. It's just to give me help if I need it. Yeah, so that's a work in progress. But let's say that the description of the locations is pretty much done. So I could share it for any who are interested. Last thing that I did is this here, the clans. For the moment, it's in French. Sorry. But for you French speakers out there, it's already available. And for the others, well, you'll have to wait for the translation. I didn't fill in here the gods because, you know, gods, spirits, or whatever, the religion. I'm going to probably choose from the list. You know, there's Lisa, the cat, or there's a few that are named in the book somewhere that aren't given to any specific clan. So this is my take on the clans. I stay as much as I can with the canon, but I just spread out a bit. So for each description, you have like, here's a little blurb, like chasseur nomade de la forêt profonde, descendant d'Ereman, le gouverneur de la province de Kalasar, à la fin de Symbaroum. So this means nomad hunters from the deep forest, descendants of Ahriman, the governor of the province of Kalazar, at the end of Symbaroum. Their most important village, fixed village, is on the shores of Lake Clearwater. And here, description of typical members of that clan. And there you have the god, you have their chief, their keeper. Any taboos, if I want to add taboos, they're like typical weapons. And then all the characters, the NPCs that are mentioned, that the most important NPCs that are mentioned, I won't put all the NPCs that are presented in that Excel file I talked about. It's not exhaustive, it's more like more important characters that I feel could be useful. So you've got that all the way to Varako and the Odavs and Jesora Karohar. There's not much on Karohar. I don't know. We'll see what happens. I'll have to think about it. And then I thanks to all the artists, by the way. Of course, this is completely fan and you know, unofficial and all that stuff. I'm not here to use art without permission. So I just made these. Maybe I should take them out of the document. But basically, I was trying to get a feel of what the clans can look like. It's not even what I think they look like actually. It's just inspiration. And it sort of has a link to what their description is. So that's the document. Here we go. Right now, you're not yet that many following this channel. So I think maybe if you want a copy of these, you can just poke me in the comments and I'll send you one. Eventually, I'll have to find a way to put that somewhere that everybody can use. So that's it for this video. I will try from now on to always have a recap video right after the game. So they will be quicker than this one. This one, because we had the part on the tools and also the combat at the window, got a bit bigger. I'll try to go really more focused just on the recap. But the idea is that you can, in the GM prep video, you can see what I prep, and then in the recap, you can see what I used and what are my ideas about it. So there you go. Just comment if you want. I really like having your comments. I like having some input from all of you. And we'll see you next time in the next video. Bye bye.